Welcome everybody to the March board meeting, full board meeting. As with all meetings, I'd like to start by saying the board wishes to recognize, welcome, and thank those who are providing language interpretation of the board proceedings. The board's commitment that all children receive equitable academic services must ensure that new American parents are welcome and can attend meetings, understand the process, and be actively engaged. Interpretation of proceedings honors, respects, and values our new American parents and students. The board asks the public and media to respect and understand the importance of this interpretation. If we can have a motion to approve the agenda as stands on board docs.
So moved.
Commissioner Curry, seconded by Commissioner Shumsky. Any amendments to the agenda? Commissioner Kirk?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment. We have a group of Boy Scouts from the local troop here, and they're working on merit badges for their citizenship. I'd like to move that we have about 10 minutes after public comment, so if they have any questions about procedure, that we can entertain those and help them through this process.
Second for that?
I'll second.
Commissioner Stoll. So we have an amended agenda. All in favor of the amended agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Great. With that, we'd like to turn it over to Principal Len Phelan, and he has a number of students that he brought from Hunt Middle School with him this evening. Len? Yeah, sure. Whatever works.
Good evening. My name is Len Phelan, and I'm the proud principal at Hunt Middle School in the New North End. And I have with me tonight Mrs. Nancy Nadell, one of our teachers of English language learners, and a handful of her students who are going to share some of the good work that they're doing to support our English language learners and to foster their success. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Mrs. Nadell and her crew.
Next month will be 2 fewer.
Thank you, and I'm going to have my students introduce themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about the projects that they've done in their classes this year. So,
Hi, my name is Lincoln. I'm from.
Hello everybody, my name is Denise. Troy, I'm from Burlington.
Hi, my name is Arjun. Gandhi. I'm going.
Hi, this is Pujira. I'm from.
And my name is Priyanka. I'm from.
I'm going to have you guys go sit down for a second, and Hannah and Lynn can stay up. And Rebecca and Lynn have each done a project in their science class, so they've worked in their mainstream classrooms, and they've done the same assignments as everybody else, with a little bit of writing instruction in my class, but they've done the research, they've done the same assignments, and they've each done a presentation at school, and Lynn, you can come on this side. So this is Lynn Phom's poster on hand washing, why we should wash our hands. And she's done a number of topics, why you should wash your hands, how do you wash your hands, when you should wash your hands. And then on this poster, she added a little extra information that I'm going to let her just tell you about.
So, about the question number 4, I have wrote what terms of bacteria are on our hands. So it looks like we need to find the information about germs and bacteria. So I make a book look like we find some information in the book. So I made the book like the dictionary about the word. So this is the picture of the term. The kind of term is the flu influenza. The influenza. This picture is about the equalize.
Good, thank you. So there's a lot of information on this poster that stays up in this school, and the kids read it. Thank you. Lynn, I'm going to have you switch places with Pramika.
These projects are part of a science project that all of our 7th and 8th grade students are doing in their science and English language arts classes that were public service projects to inform the public on how to stay healthy and avoid health risks.
And I should say that these are members of the OASIS team, and this is Mrs. Willie's class. So again, another hand washing topic with information about how to wash your hands properly, a lot of careful work. And actually, Hanukkah, why did you choose this topic of hand washing?
I choose this topic because this is most important to wash your hands. If you don't choose to wash your if you don't wash your hands, that make you sick. And if I choose this wash your hands because this is safe for family and friends.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Pramika. Awesome. Okay. I think we'll next crew. Thank you very much. Mahes and Udi have something to share. I'll let you hold your. Let's hold it up a little higher, and why don't you come on my side, Mahes? Again, OASIS students from Mrs. Willie's classroom, and their topic is something a little different, fever. Okay, and they have a lot of extra information too. I'll hold it higher. This poster has been in the cafeteria, and it's been very well read. It's got crinkled edges. So a lot of information, but one thing we wanted to point out, Mahes, when should you call the doctor when you have a fever?
Like temperature is 103 degree and 39.4 degree or higher than that. And you can call a doctor.
Okay. Any other time to call the doctor?
You had a fever for more than 2 days.
Yep. Also very important. Great, thank you. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna. Do you understand anything? Moody worked pretty hard on this too. Okay, thanks, guys. You can have a seat. We can keep the posters on the side if people would like to read it.
So before you guys
One
leave,
more.
we should all stand over.
Arjun, would you like to come up and talk about your incredible project? I'm going to review it on the screen. Arjun's project is part of a very large language arts project where students were reading a favorite, or what they call an anchor book, but a favorite book, and they had to do expository writing. They had to add about 4 chapters. It could be fiction or nonfiction, and so Arjun has written a nonfiction piece that he has personal experience with, and he wrote it because the book he read, Arcady's Goal, is about a Russian orphan who had to improvise when he was playing soccer. He used a potato crate for a soccer goal, so gave Arjun an idea of what he could write about. So you could stay here, and I'll just move the. Okay. So a good visual. Okay. This is a how-to, right, Arjun? Okay. What you need? Plastic bags and string. And Arjun is going to read us the steps to making the soccer ball.
Here, 10 plastic bags long store with rod. Take your first plastic bag, bounce into a small ball. Take string and wrap it in like star. If you want to make a soccer ball, use one plastic bag. If you
And the last step, Arjun, is what? Yeah, great. Thank you. Awesome. I think that's it for tonight.
The progress that the students make is remarkable. Arjun has been here for 5 months, so he hasn't been here very long, and they're just all making remarkable progress, and that's certainly to the credit of Mrs. Nadell, Mrs. Kukovic, who also works with them and couldn't be here tonight, and the rest of our fine teaching staff at Hunt Middle School.
Were there anyone on the board have any questions for either Ms. Nadell or Mr. Phelan or any of the students?
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
So before you leave, why don't you stand right over here?
Yeah.
So if the board chair wants to join them over there, the teacher, the principal should stand behind the students with their posters right there. Okay. Right there.
Where are we coming? Right here?
That's your camera over there.
I do have a question.
You gotta recognize him somehow.
Charlie, right here?
Yep, right there. That's your camera over there.
Patrick,
Let's just say you have a question.
can I ask a quick question? Yeah. Wait till everyone
Okay,
gets
face
settled
this
here.
way. Face me.
No, we're gonna face this way, but I wanted to ask you guys a question. I want to know what your favorite part of doing this project was. Because it was a lot of work, obviously, and hard work.
What was the best part?
Yeah, hey. Right.
I feel like I'm at a family gathering. Or like, you know, like they're trying to get pictures in a tree or something.
Are you feeling nostalgia over there? Are you feeling nostalgia over there?
Work, guys.
So as people know, last Tuesday night was, or not, last Tuesday was our town meeting day. And with that, we have several new board members who are going to be joining the board from the North District. New board members were invited to join us tonight. Some were out of town and were unable to make it. But Mark Barlow from the North District will be a new board member joining from there. Lauren Baritz Bietia is going to be joining us from Ward 8, and she's out of town this evening. Susan Marie Harrington is in Ward 5. Congratulations from here. And is Ann Judson in here? Oh, Ann, there you are in the back. Will be the new board member from Ward 4. So congratulations to the 4 new board members. That wasn't for you, Kyle.
I was like, damn.
And with the new board members coming on, we also have, I believe, 6 board members who will be leaving. And just a quick token of appreciation for the leaving board members. Let's see. Ben Truman. Ben? So Ben is one of our 2 longest serving board members coming, that's currently on the board, coming to us from Ward 4. He has been on 6 years.
4, seems like 6.
Is it just 4? Okay, I guess you're the second in line. I guess Alan's been here a little longer. This past year, Ben has taken charge of the Policy Governance Committee, and we really appreciate his help with that, of course. And Ben has always been our go-to person for any wordsmithing in any press release, and at short notice, he's been able to take our scrawl and turn it into something that made a lot of sense. And Ben, thank you for your years of service. Charlie Giannoni. Charlie has been on the board for just 1 year, and we appreciate his year of service. One thing that I particularly appreciate with Charlie's service is that whenever there is a meeting to be held, Charlie would be there. He would listen, he would come, he would ask questions, he would take notes, and he may have won the record for most hours spent in meetings over the course of the year, and really worked hard to keep himself informed and participate. So thank you very much for your time, Charlie. Kevin Garrison. So Kevin has been just came on the board in August, is that right? So served a little under a year for us, and came on, ran from Ward 7, and has been instrumental in kind of doing very quiet things behind the scenes. I remember a very good example of that is when we were trying to put together an ad for advertising for our new superintendent. We talked about, there are all these great things that Burlington's been noted for that we should put in the ad, that Parents Magazine has said Burlington's the second best city in America to live in, or whatever it was. And we kind of threw these around, and I got home and turned on my computer that evening, and Kevin had gone online, found a whole list of things to share with us, and that's kind of some of the, for us to put in the ad. And I think that's indicative of some of the quiet leadership that Kevin has shown in his short time with us on the board. So thank you, Kevin. And finally, Alan Matson. Alan. Alan is our longest-serving member, and Alan has been with us for 6 years, so that's where I got my mistake. That Alan has been with us for 6 years. He was the board chair last year. He has served as a finance chair, and has really, in an extremely young board in terms of years of service, hours of service. Alan has been the institutional memory for the board this year. And when there are issues that I've had that have come up that I've had to deal with as a chair, Alan has been on my speed dial to answer those questions with grace and availability. And I also have to echo something that Chip Hart said last week, that something that completely separate from his work with the board, that I think tells a lot about Alan's character, is that every Monday and Tuesday mornings, at 7:15, he is either at Hunt or Edmonds Middle School working with a group of between 4 and 10 students, just doing some math challenge with them. He gets he doesn't ask for any recognition. Any recognition he gets, he takes quietly and passively, and it's really a highlight of the week for several of those kids, and I think it represents his dedication just larger to education. So thank you, Alan, for all your. So moving on next, we have public comment. I don't know if we have anyone has. Kathy, could you check for us? Is there anyone who signed up on the public comment list right there? Didn't grab that.
Stop.
Please don't. Please don't.
No,
Please
okay.
don't. No, don't. It's all right.
Can we just say it?
Sure.
Just announce it?
Sure.
So, we've been asked not to say much, but I am going to ask Liz to say a short thing, and I just want to everyone to know that Patrick Halliday, our chair, will be stepping off the board after
4 years.
4 years of service. It's been a very challenging time for the board, and Patrick has been a good leader, taken risks, kept us together, more or less, and we really appreciate it. So, Liz, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to add a tremendous thanks to Patrick for being willing to step up to be chair when he could not, any of us could have not had any idea what was about to happen. And through it all, Patrick, you know, I think I personally probably would have drowned with everything going on, and Patrick really pulled through, you know, with a great tenaciousness and graciousness, and did provide leadership to the board during probably one of the most tumultuous years the district has seen in a long time. So I really enjoyed working with Patrick as the clerk, and just was always quite amazed that he was always listening and heard everything that everybody said, even if he didn't have time to actually acknowledge it. You know, I would come back to him with things and find that he'd already pretty much vetted everything that people had thought of. So I don't know quite how he did that, but it was quite a feat. And so you have my admiration and great thanks for getting us through this year.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it. Thank you, too kind. And I do, Scott Shumsky asked for nothing to be said, but I do want to acknowledge that Scott's going to be leaving the board and has provided an important voice, I think, to the board over the course of the last year. So thank you, Scott. Kathy, was there anyone who has signed up on the list? Is there anyone for public comment who would like to come forth?
It's just that it took me about 20 minutes to park, and so I would urge you all to reconsider this location and think about going back into the schools for your meetings. It just doesn't make sense to meet here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. At this time, we do have time set aside for board reflections. If there are any board members who would like to make some comments. Commissioner Porter.
I just wanted to very briefly thank Alan again for his service here. The legacy knowledge on both the ITC and the finance side of things really allowed us to shortcut a lot of decisions, because we were able to find out what had been decided on in the past, what had been considered on the past, and what wasn't going to work, and so on. So Alan, I wanted to thank you for that, because it really saved us a lot of time on a lot of things, and it made us made those long meetings much shorter. So for that, I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Curry.
I also wanted to thank my committee colleagues, Charlie and Ben, for what I thought was a great and productive year. We had good leadership. Ben just kept at the stuff we had to get done, and I felt like we actually got a lot done during a year when it was tough to get stuff done. And I wanted to thank Charlie for really a great perspective that you brought to the committee, and really important insights and points that you raised on both policies and many of the decisions the board faced. So I really enjoyed serving with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Seguino.
I'd like to just say a few words about Kevin Garrison, who was on the Diversity and Equity Committee with me, and I wanted to thank him. He brought an enormous amount of expertise in terms of experience with youth, and we were really enriched by his presence. I also want to thank Scott. Scott, I think, has been such an important voice on the board and has really modeled for us the significance of having respectful debate. I think we are a board now in which we are not afraid to have different points of view and to debate them and vet them, and we are much stronger for it. And I think we owe a lot of that to Scott. Thanks.
Scott?
This is going to be my final board reflection as commissioner for the Burlington School District, and you guys remember all those Senator Rand Paul filibusters that go on. It'll be shorter than my budget discussion. During my tenure on the board, I've consciously strived to remember my place. I think Mark Twain summed it up perfectly in the quote from Following the Equator when he said, "In the first place, God made idiots. This was for practice. Then he made school boards." While humorous, this quotation is also a humble reminder to current and future board members that while you should always take your responsibility as a board member seriously, you should never take yourself too seriously. I have former school commissioner Keith Pillsbury, with whom I disagreed on so many issues, but with whom I had much respect and admiration, to thank for teaching last year's freshman class the importance of board members coming together after each meeting. The ritual that he taught us, though small, factored largely into the board's ability to not only tread water this past year, but also to move the district forward considerably. I am proud that during this board's tenure, a separation agreement with former Superintendent Collins was reached almost immediately after the new board took office. I am proud that during this board's tenure, Finance Director Lavery came to our district. I am proud that during this board's tenure, Interim Superintendent Smith came to our district. I am proud that during this board's tenure, we were able to restrain spending in the rate of the budget growth to 1.75% when the past decade has averaged over 7%. A figure I can't recall during my 43 years of life, the 1.75%. I am proud that during this board's tenure, the school budget passed in all wards of the city, a fact former school commissioner Keith Pillsbury informed me only happened once during his 24 years on the board. Thanks in no small part to the heavy canvassing by School Commissioner David Kirk, who asked voters to overcome their concerns as he had and voted in favor of the budget. Without Commissioner Kirk knocking on doors throughout Ward 7, the passage by 24 votes, 701 to 677, clearly would not have happened. I'm proud to have served on Chairman Stoll's Finance Committee and all the work that was begun this year by her and my fellow committee members. There will be things I will not miss. I will not miss the neighbors, such as the one who extended the middle finger to me while passing me in the Ethan Allen Shopping Center, while my 2-year-old Acadia and 3-year-old Eva and 6-year-old Hunter are in the car. I will not miss the multiple neighbors who scream profanities out their car windows while I supervise my 3 children playing out on the front lawn near the entrance to the Beltline. I will not miss the race politics that have entered school board issues. When the board decided last year not to hire a white person for the assistant principal position, many in the community felt that myself individually, as well as the board, were simply acting as diversity now was instructing us to do so. Not true. That we were practicing a reverse form of discrimination. That was replaced in the community by those who claim I am now racist. As one resident who supported my opponent stated, it was because my opponent would decide what's in the best interest of all kids, not just the white ones. So in the span of 1 year, I went from practicing reverse discrimination against white people to only caring about white kids. Somehow those two images are both still out there. I just hate everyone. As an elected official, I understand and accept that my neighbors can display their lawful disagreement with my policy positions, no matter how vulgar, tasteless, or untruthful those displays of opinion may be. However, it's no small relief to know that my 3 small children will no longer be subjected to this treatment. I also want to thank the staff of the Burlington School District for holding the district together over the past year, and in particular, I want to recognize Miranda for doing a great job in the finance office. You know, getting Nathan has been great as the finance director in this office, but let's not kid ourselves, as Miranda was the glue that held that finance office and the district together over the past year. Her work was very crucial. So thank you very much, Miranda. And finally, I'd like to thank Board Chair Holliday for his stewardship over the past year. I'm sure Commissioner Holliday never imagined the year that was about to unfold when he was elected board chair, but considering the growing pains we had, and they were growing pains, they weren't problems, they were growing pains, I commend Board Chair Holliday for keeping the ship afloat. And I'd like to close with my favorite James Garfield quotation, because I have a lot of them. Next in importance to freedom and justice is a popular education without which neither freedom nor justice can permanently be maintained. James Garfield, upon accepting the Republican nomination for president in 1880. Thank you very much.
Any further board reflections? All right, hearing none. Next on our agenda was a chance for the Boy Scout troop to ask some questions and address the board. Commissioner Kirk, please. I'm sorry. Thank you.
As they come up, I'd just like to note that these gentlemen, this is a troop I've been active with for about 15 years in Burlington. They meet every Monday night at St. Mark's. This is a small portion of the troop. They're working on merit badges, and we have a couple of young men up there that have reached or are on the verge of reaching their Eagle Scout, which is quite an achievement for these guys. They're really here just to see board policy and I just want to welcome them and thank them for coming up, because I've worked with these guys for years.
Thank you. And I'm Jim Rainville from the Burlington Boy Scouts. This is Blaze Rainville, and this is Jack Tolka, and Connor O'Brien, and Liam O'Brien. And I just wanted to say thank you. I know it's a tough job sometimes serving on the school board. I know you've got the kids' best interest at heart, so thank you for your good work. Do you boys have any questions?
Once again, thank you for your service. I just wanted to ask, how do you personally assess the success of students in the school district? It's based on grade point average.
Someone would like to take a stab at that. I know that I don't want to, I'm looking at you, Commissioner Dodson, but don't feel like that. This is a discussion that the curriculum committee has been engaged in, and feel free to pass.
Well, he did enter to a round of applause, so.
Unearned, yeah, coming in the back door. No, I appreciate that question. It's a very good question. It's a question that deserves to be able to be answered. I would say that right now, the district measures the success of its students in a number of ways, lots of different ways. And there's I think a district conversation and a national conversation about what are the most substantive, legitimate, honoring students in their full personhood. We bring lots of capacities and dimensions to the task of school. And a lot of this you may hear, I think, is in response to what has happened perhaps in the last decade or so with No Child Left Behind, and a lot of emphasis put on standardized tests. Although even during that time, teachers were continuing to use multiple measures, but the measure that got the most press was standardized tests. And just as a personal editorial, I don't think standardized tests are all evil, but they certainly are problematic when they're the only measure. I think they have a place, and what we're trying to do is to find those things that provide the holistic approach that we want to looking at students and apply them. So one very important focus we have is trying to dedicate the school district to making sure that all of our students are reading at a proficient level by third grade. And there are some tools that I believe are pretty widely accepted to measure that literacy. So we're really trying to drill down and understand the data we have to this point, and really firm up those tools for the future and become much more public about that, really have a dialogue around what's happening, the work that we're doing, and how we're progressing on that point. So I hope that answer gave you somewhat. So as people alluded to, the curriculum committee is currently focusing on literacy, although that's not our only interest. We obviously care about students' performance across the curriculum, all the subject areas, and social-emotional development, how students are doing character development, citizenship development. The partnership has been, I think, really helpful in thinking about those things. So it's a work in progress.
And just to add to that, I know that the Burlington library system here has a great program in the summer encouraging kids to read. My children participate in those.
I agree.
It's excellent, and I agree that's a very strong need for children to become literate and to like reading, because then their skills, their English skills, they all take off.
Exactly. And just since you mentioned it, one of the things we are looking at is this concept referred to as summer learning loss. So there's this idea that what can happen is you learn all throughout the school year, and then in the summer, when there's generally less structured learning opportunities, there can be kind of a movement back in terms of those skills attained over the school year. So we're looking at that. Does that affect certain populations disproportionately? And what sort of interventions can we do to try to prevent that learning loss from happening? So you touched on something important.
Yeah, Commissioner Clayman?
I just want to add that on a personal level, I see student success when I get to go into the schools and see kids in the classroom actively engaged, paying attention, and if not having fun, then at least being there. and participating in school events and activities and representing our schools and in the city, and coming to events like this, to board meetings, and just telling us what's going on. So thank you.
Commissioner Porter.
Who's about to get Eagle?
I'm sorry?
Who's on path to get Eagle Scout? Hey, really, do you have any idea what that means on a resume later on in life? You're not doing it for that reason, but let me tell you something. There are managers that go after that. I would agree.
Yeah, that's good. My eldest son just got a Eagle, and he enlisted in the Navy. So, and that's an automatic 2-rank increase.
Is that right? There you go.
Any further questions? Yeah, please.
My question is, was wondering how the Burlington Technical Center is funded. Is it in like the school budget, or is it a different school? Because I was just wondering.
You may have cheated a little bit in looking at our agenda for tonight, because that's actually an issue that's going to be coming up later on this evening. But, Mira, do you want to go ahead and answer that?
Sure, that's a great question. You go through the technical center?
I'm in the technical center.
Oh, which program?
Automotive science and technology.
Excellent. So, yeah, so the Burlington Technical Center is a regional program. So, as you know, districts in the region that come. So we're like the sponsoring school, but students actually from the different districts pay tuition. So each district pays tuition for their students to come. And then we also fund, because it's in our buildings and so forth, so we put some money into it as well. So it's sort of a joint, it's a very unique situation. I think there's only one, there's the Essex Center. Is there another one besides Essex?
I've heard of the Essex one. I'm not sure about any other.
I think
But within our region, but without there's others around the state.
Right. So it's quite a unique program, and so that's how it's funded. It's a separate thing. And what Commissioner Halliday was talking about is tonight we are going to vote to approve the budget for next year. So our finance director has brought us a budget that he worked on with the head of the Burlington Technical Center, and we will be approving that. And what we're approving is more or less for other people to give us money to keep it running. So it's a good deal, but it's a great program. I'm glad you're in it.
Any further questions?
I think that's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you for for coming out this evening and your interest, and for your in your service and the dedication that you're showing in scouting. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Plugged into a power strip, but the power strip wasn't plugged in, so it didn't do me much good. Next on our agenda is to look at just to acknowledge the other results from our meeting. I'm sorry, from the town meeting votes last Tuesday. The school board budget passed, as Commissioner Shumsky said, in all 7 boards. A total of 66% to 34%, 66% in favor, 34% opposed, so about a 2/3, almost exactly a 2/3 vote in favor. The other school-related issue that was on the ballot that was directly related to the schools was the Taft issue, and that was about a 3/4 to 1/4 margin that it passed by as well. So thank you to all the voters who came out and voted, regardless of how you voted, but for coming out and exercising your right and sharing your opinions with the larger on town meeting day. Next, we'll turn it over to Nadia Beck-Conger and Jocelyn Fletcher-Scheich, who are both teachers in the 9th grade humanities program, which is the joint social studies and English language arts program. That's a double block every other day. They're going to talk to us about proficiency-based learning.
Here tonight, and also just hi, that's nice to see former parents, former students, and current parents. It's nice to see a lot of folks we know here. So we're here tonight to talk to you a little bit, just give you a snapshot about what proficiency-based teaching and learning looks like in our classrooms. And we do teach humanities. We teach in this double block. I'm the social studies part of that partnership, and Jocelyn is the English part of that partnership. And what we'd really like to do is just to give you a very sort of a real visual of what the work that the Partnership for Change is supporting looks like in classrooms with kids. Jocelyn and I are partner teachers this year, and much of this work that we are doing in classrooms with our students is really supported by the partnership. We understand that sometimes it might seem like the Partnership for Change is like this big ambiguous thing and we don't really know what they're doing, and so we want to give you a very clear snapshot of what that looks like with kids in classrooms at Burlington High School. You know, sometimes learning feels a lot like the Olympics, and it's one of those things where you get one chance every 4 years to run in the 400-meter final. And for some people, it's like this, and it's amazing. It's fantastic. And yet, it's not like that for everyone. For some people, it's more like this. And so, we just feel like that's not right. And so we'd like to think about teaching and learning not as the Olympics, where you get one chance, but really as more like driver's ed. And when a number of us learned to drive, we got some coaching, some teaching, we did some practicing, and then we took a test. And a great number of us, present company not included, I'm sure, don't pass on the first try. And that's not like, okay, too bad, you're all done, try again in 4 years. You go back and you try again, and you do some more practicing, and you do some more coaching, and then you try again, and you keep trying for most folks until you get it. And we would like to approach learning more like driver's ed and a little bit less like the Olympics. Do you want to say more about that, Jocelyn?
In talking about kind of a way for us to make sure that it's more like driver's ed, all of the partner teachers and many of the teachers at BHS are adopting proficiencies. Proficiencies are our course standards. There are a few of them that we look at through the year. What's really important about a proficiency is that you have multiple attempts at the proficiency, that we know that time is flexible. So some students are going to achieve that proficiency earlier in the year, and other students are going to achieve that proficiency later in the year. And it's not about the time that it takes you to get there, it's about getting there. Here are a few of the proficiencies that we've been working on in our humanities classes, and those will look familiar to some of you who your students are working on those. They're based on the Common Core standards. One thing that we have found is that in talking to our students about learning, so ingrained in them because of us, in our system, is the idea of grades. And those grades are really, we talk about them as being carrots and sticks, and the brain has a hard time learning when there are too many sticks. So we're talking to students using this new language, so we're teaching them new language about exceeding, meeting, approaching, or beginning when it comes to the proficiencies. Students attain proficiency, so we say that they have attained proficiency in one of those areas, or maybe that they're approaching proficiency in one of those areas. What this means is that for us, the reporting to students is almost all in this type of feedback. We're not saying, you did all this work and it's a C or it's an A. But that really, it's very clear what they need to know, and they're either exceeding, meeting, approaching, or beginning to that specific proficiency.
So what we'd like to do now is to walk you through one very specific example. So this was sort of the broad overview, and now we're going to look at one specific example and how does that play itself out in our classrooms with students. So sort of the first step is to make the skill very, very transparent to students. So as Jocelyn said, our proficiencies are based on the Common Core. And so one of our proficiencies is about summarizing. We're going to focus on that one here. All of our proficiencies are in I can language. So that students, we really want this to be transparent to students and for students to internalize, okay, I may not be there yet, but I will be able to do this, I can do it. We do a pre-assessment to see where students are, and that way we can target our instruction to specifically where students are in terms of reaching this proficiency before we do any teaching. Go Justin. Can you go back one? Step 2 is to teach. We do some teaching of the skill or the essential knowledge, and that looks a lot like teaching and learning really always has, or at least for the last several years has in our classrooms. We do a variety of activities. These students are reading
Romeo and Juliet.
Right now our students are reading Of Mice and Men. So we do a variety of activities for students to get some introduction to the skill, to practice the skill, to work some more on it, to work individually, to work in groups, just like we always have. Then they do some more practice on their own. And practice is really fun, as you can see. So that's really the next step, is for students to get some very specific targeted practice on this individual skill. Thanks. And then
we move on to assessment. And really our students have what we call, and we set it up from the very beginning, this is your first attempt at proficiency. And so we make it very clear their brains don't go into panic mode, because we're saying to them, this is a first attempt. So we expect that you might fail. That's okay. We want you to work on it at your first attempt. Many students, when we do that first attempt, they've done the practice, they've done the learning, they meet or exceed the proficiency. Many approach the proficiency. And some are beginning at that proficiency because they just aren't there yet. For this activity, we were having students, they were summarizing on, they had to do one summary of a literary text and also summary of nonfiction text. Part of the process in good teaching is making sure that you're providing feedback. It's difficult to do when you have 100 students, but try and make sure we give our students as much feedback as possible through clear communication in our online grading system, so a lot of comments there. And then also through individual conferences. And then also we have this proficiency data that we report out to our students. So on our first attempt, how many of us actually met the standard? What's going on here? And we talk about what are the steps that we need to take now that this 74% of you have met this standard. What do we need to do now in order to get the rest of us to the standard? And the most fun part is putting stickers up. We resisted the stickers for a while, but students love putting up stickers. It's our public display that, hey, we have done this, we're in it together, and we acknowledge that everyone in this room is going to make it to the proficiency. It's a great way for us to build some community around learning in the classroom.
But all of our students don't get to proficiency on that first try. And so we use that proficiency after we've given some feedback to reteach, and in particular to individualize and give some one-on-one instruction for students who aren't yet meeting the standard or who aren't yet proficient. Students then have more opportunity to practice, and we build that in. Here are 3 more different ways you could practice. Here are 3 more different opportunities. And then ultimately, we give them another opportunity to take another assessment, to reassess that skill. And by the time we get to the 3rd attempt, we've definitely done some one-on-one instruction, and often we're also giving some other type of assessment. Many of our students have bought into this culture that we have worked really hard to create, which is that students do what they need to do to get to proficiency. And so this is actually maybe 3:45. Our school day technically ends at 3. We have what's called callback from 3 to 3:30. And historically, callback was kind of seen as glorified detention. And we have really worked hard to change that dynamic so that coming after school is no longer seen as a punishment. It's not some kind of consequence for behavior. It's seen as come and do what you need to do time. And so all these students are and we have some regulars, but then we also have folks who will drop in and say, okay, I need to work on this, I didn't understand this. And so we've worked really hard to create that culture of learning in that support time after school rather than, well, I think I need to talk to you about your behavior. Just a quick snapshot of some data. So, it's not the most elegant graph, but so if you see down here, you see this is the number of attempts. So first attempt is this first data point, second attempt, and third attempt. The percentages on the side are the percent of students who were proficient. So this is our summarizing proficiency. On our first attempt, just around 30% of our students were proficient. We found that actually summarizing was a much more challenging skill than our first proficiency that we did, which was annotation. And students, and actually we were kind of floored by how hard that was for students. By our second attempt, we had mid-40s in terms of proficiency. That took 2 attempts just even to get close to 50%. And now we've done 3 attempts and we have over 80% of our students. We'll have another attempt. We have another chance to have a summarizing proficiency assessment coming up. And so our hope is to get those last few students proficiency on attempt number 4, but it's not the Olympics, right? It's not that you get 1 chance at the 400 final, right? This is 4 chances with lots and lots of practice in between.
So this is our formula that we're using to think about learning in our classroom. We want students to internalize this formula, to really not be afraid of failure. We feel like our system is really setting kids up to experience so much anxiety if they don't get it right the first time. So we're really trying to help them work through that anxiety so that they can know that with some perseverance, they can achieve some really rigorous standards. And we feel like this will help them be more perseverant when they leave us and go out into the world.
Ultimately, the reason we do this work, the reason we went back to the drawing board and redesigned a lot of the work that we had done in the past was that a proficiency-based system holds all of our students to high expectation and provides equal access to that challenging curriculum. And for us, that's what this is about. We're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Gina.
Even though you're right there, I'm going to talk in this so
Great.
everyone's... You can probably hear me. Can you hear me without it? No?
You have it, use it.
Okay. So I'm curious from your perspective, implementing this philosophy of learning on the ground level, what you would think would be the greatest challenges trying to implement it system-wide, and what kind of support would you need? Meaning like the teachers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
The teachers.
it's a really great question. One thing I think that we do is we live this for our students, so we are very humble about the fact that we fail a lot, and sometimes we try stuff and it doesn't work. And as a teacher, that's a really scary place to be. And so when I think about supports that teachers need, I think that teachers need that space for failure, and they need that space to do some experimenting, and that's what the Partner Teacher Program has really done for us. We've been able to talk to our student consultants, our other partner teachers, and really have them help us think through some of these really complicated systems that we're trying to implement in a way that's really scary and new for us. So that's been a great support.
Yeah, I would just say really 3 things. Time. All of this design, architecture of this system took a tremendous amount of time. As partner teachers, we're released from some of our teaching duties to have that time. So time is essential. Second is instructional support. We have the Partnership for Change. We have a teaching and learning coach who works with this. She gathers resources for us. She looks at our work. She comes into our classroom. So that instructional support is critical. And the third thing is class size. So in order to tailor instruction to a heterogeneously grouped class and hold all of our students to high standards and at the same time meet all of our kids where they are, we can't do that with 26, 27 kids in a class. We can't do that well. So time, instructional support, and class size, those are the 3 big things.
Commissioner Stoll.
To sort of supports or depends on or interacts with the whole concept of differentiated instruction. So, you know, I guess I was coming to that point, like how do you do this with a group of heterogeneous students? We're holding them all, we want them all at the same outcome, but they're not coming in at the same place. And I understand that's a dilemma for anyone, but I wonder if maybe you could give an example about how this proficiency-based system either helps that or hinders it or...
Sure. I'm glad you asked that. So we just, for anyone who doesn't know, we do teach a heterogeneously grouped earned honors option class in 9th grade. So all of our students have honors available to them. They work to earn honors, but all of our students working towards honors and our students not working towards honors are all in our class together. Where to begin? So the first thing we do is we really try to be very precise about what it is that we're assessing. So I'm going to take summarizing as an example. One of the things that we realized early on in this summarizing experience, and as Jocelyn said, we do a lot of trial and error. We try things that don't work. We go back to the kids. We're like, that didn't work. Was we had to be able to parse out what is reading skill and what is summarizing skill. So if I give my students a text that is above their reading level, then they can't show me that they can summarize it, that they can identify the main idea and the key supporting details, that they can distinguish between their own opinions about the text and what the text is actually saying. If the text is above their reading level, they can't really do that. And so one of the things that we've done is when we do a summarizing proficiency, we provide choice in the level of challenge. And we make that available to all our students. So we really subscribe to this idea of challenge by choice. And we give students lots of feedback on how that's going for them. When we have students who are choosing less challenge than they ought to be choosing, we give them a little nudge. And sometimes we have kids who are choosing challenge that's up here and their reading level is down here, and we have to go, how's that working for you? So that was sort of one of the most basic ways that we have approached this, is to provide scaffolded materials and provide students choice in which one that they chose. A lot of our students, by the time they got to the 3rd attempt, even some of our kids who are really strong readers, chose the less challenging text because it was muddling the way for them, this challenging text. And so that's just sort of one way that we've approached that. If you can imagine that in all our proficiency work, we're doing that same level of scaffolding, or we're trying to do it, that same level of scaffolding for each of the skills that we're working on. And the other thing that we do is by the time we get to the 2nd and 3rd attempt, we try different ways of assessment. So lots of our kids in the 3rd try, they did a verbal assessment, or they did a graphic organizer instead of writing a paragraph, or they did a graphic organizer and then they sat down and we interviewed them. And we teased out what it was that they understood.
Thank you very much. And it's very much.
Commissioner Dotson?
Two kind of related questions. First, thank you, Nadia and Jocelyn. This is great. It seems that it would be the relatively easier task would be setting the proficiency level and getting some degree of consensus around what rises to the mark of proficiency. But it seems like each level beneath that could be a little murkier. Like, how do you set the ones beneath that? Like approaching, just meet. You got exceeds. It seems like those ones beneath could leave more room for interpretation. So getting to some consensus feeling for that, and then connected to that is, what's it look like to integrate this system with the old grade system, which my understanding still exists. So what's that, what's that integration look like for the student, for you all? Because
Right
you
now,
still
it's
report grades,
complicated.
right? It's complicated. Okay.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, right now, what we're being asked to do is we still write 1 grade on a report card.
But you're doing something very different up until that point.
So we're operating in 2 different paradigms.
Okay. Yes.
And that is confusing for students, it's confusing for parents, and it's a lot of work for us.
And it's maddening.
Okay.
Because we feel like we're doing all this work to give students really good feedback about what they're learning, but at the end of the day, the currency is 1 grade, and that's important to them,
Right.
and we know that that's important to them, it's important to their parents, and it's there, it's what exists right now. So at the end of the day, that's what they're really focused on. So this really awkward place that we're in where we're talking about, we want you to focus on the learning, we want to take off some of the pressure, but by the way, the pressure's still there and grades close this week. So it's complicated, and it's messy right now.
Are there conversations with the partnership, and is there a plan, or have we seen models of schools, particularly schools with a competitive history as far as college admission goes, that have made the move, and they're there. They kind of show us the path. They let go of the grades, and they're in some kind of proficiency thing, and they're still going to college and having the outcomes. Do we have models?
They're out there,
Okay.
and they're doing well, and several of the teachers at Burlington High School have done some school visits to those places to try and adopt some of the stuff that's working so that we don't have to reinvent it. The partnership has been very supportive in trying to get us to those places, get those teachers to us, but absolutely colleges know that this is coming. I think this, you mentioned it before, I think this is a national trend.
Commissioner-elect Judson.
We do. Should I pull up the summarizing one? Sure.
So you're about to see my really messy Google Drive, so just avert your eyes.
So we tried not to, this can be really overwhelming. So basically every proficiency we've broken down into learning targets. Each of those learning targets we teach specifically based on the pre-assessment, what our students know or do not know. Based on the pre-assessment, there are certain things that we know that we have to teach. Nadia mentioned some of those learning targets, main idea, finding key ideas for summarizing. And then for each of those learning targets, they show up on our rubrics. And so the rubric creation is something that takes a lot of time and thought, and also is really based on experiences. So where do we see that students in the past with summarizing have almost gotten it? They just need to do that one thing. So for example, for me in summarizing a literary text, oftentimes students don't write the main events in chronological order. So that's something that approaches. Yeah. I'll keep answering questions if you want.
Commissioner Curry, go ahead.
Thanks. I really appreciate the work you're doing. I have a son in 9th grade and one who graduated 2 years ago, and I can see just an enormous difference in the way that he approaches his humanities work, so thank you. My question's probably a little bit more global or kind of systemic in terms of like next year and the year after that, and we all just got these like 4-year course plans, and I'm just wondering like how the partnership plans to integrate the work that's happening this year, which seems foundational, with both implementing Act 77 and bringing along the middle school, and then next year like you guys aren't going to be there, and so I'm just kind of wondering what's going to happen.
So it's really important that we get partnership funds and that the Nellie Mae Foundation hears support from you really strongly. They're waiting for that, and they're waiting to hear lots of support from our new superintendent, because we're partway there on the journey. We feel like we're on the journey, but there's a long way to go. With that said, there are a lot of different places where people are experimenting with a lot of different ways to do this work. So we're not yet at the point where we're kind of implementing it across the board, across all of the high school. So students, I think, will have some experiences in these so your son will have some experiences where he might go into a really traditional class next year and then have a proficiency-based class the next year. So right now it's in flux.
Or have a teacher who's just dipping their toe in the water next year, who has been in on conversations with us all year long and just felt like that was too much to take, didn't feel they could take it on. And next year they're just starting to, so There's a real continuum of where folks are in this journey, as Jocelyn put it.
With that said, the partner teacher program got a flood of applications from the faculty for this work next year. So there is momentum absolutely building towards this work, and people are starting to get excited now that they see what's happening with it.
Commissioner Kirk?
So I have I guess a more basic question. You give the students 3 attempts, or at this point, 3 attempts on this particular project. And the students, the 20% that passed it the first time, what are they doing while the other, 80% are working on this? And how do we keep those students engaged throughout the year when they've done this? And how often do you test proficiency? Is it once they've passed proficiency, now we move on to plan B and we go to whatever that proficiency might be? How do you move on and that? And then it seems like on the 3rd attempt, I'm sorry, it's kind of a basic question, I thought. By the 3rd attempt, you're actually redesigning the way you're asking the question to dilute it maybe, or I don't know. I'm just saying, because you changed the policy around, so you're holding people to a different standard. So how do you know what I mean? That's the way you described it. Okay, so that's what I got out of this. I'm a little confused at how we're holding everybody through this proficiency-based learning, and then we're changing it at the test point.
Maybe I'll try the first part of your question, and Jocelyn can try the second part. So the first part of your question, or the first and second part, are what do kids do who are already at proficiency? So if we're going to think about summarizing as a skill, right? Summarizing is not something that once you're done, you're like, okay, check the box, I'm all done with that, I never have to summarize again. In a humanities classroom, summarizing is part of the work that you do all the time. My first assessment of summarizing was in October. We're still summarizing. We're summarizing different kinds of text for different purposes. Now we're looking at it through this lens. Now we're looking at primary sources and primary sources as sources of information. So we have chosen proficiencies that are transferable skills and are really essential to everything that we do all the time. So there's always more you can do. That's sort of the first part. So students who reach proficiency, they're not done reading and thinking about reading, right? They read more challenging texts, read and compare. They do more things with text as we're moving through. And so I can give a topic with 3 choices of text, and I have some who are summarizing that to practice proficiency, some who are reading 2 choices and comparing them. So because we've chosen as proficiencies really essential transferable skills, there's always more we can do with that. The last piece that I would say is that when I'm asking a student to summarize what the main idea of the text is and the most important key details, and to distinguish between what they think about the text and what the author thinks about the text, I can assess that in any number of ways. The most efficient way for me to do it is to have students do it in writing and give it to me, right? Because then I can take it home and I can stay up till 11 o'clock at night and do it. There's no reason I can't do that verbally. I'm not diluting the assessment by having a student talk about it or make a graphic organizer and then explain it to me. They're still having to read and analyze text. So what I'm really changing is the way that they show what they're learning, not what they're learning itself.
So do you work on them in that process? Do you work on them being able to get their thought process out in writing? Because they actually didn't achieve that portion of the assessment. They did summarize, but they didn't achieve that portion because, getting things out in text is very important, especially today. Otherwise we're going to have kids talking in 1-letter words.
Which is why we have a writing proficiency also. But when we're assessing summarizing, we're not assessing writing.
Right.
We're assessing summarizing. So then we work on the writing proficiency so they can get their ideas out in writing too.
So do you, now, I guess I missed, what do you do with the kids that have reached that point right away? I mean, how are you challenging them? How are you continuing to challenge them? That was the second part.
As I said, they're reading more challenging texts, reading texts and comparing them. They are taking the text further. They are doing a higher level analysis of text. So they're still working with text. They're just not practicing the summarizing for proficiency. And I can blow kids' minds with text, right? So I can give 3 different choices for text, and if I have a kid who is just sailing through the most challenging one, I can always find a text that is more challenging than that, right? So that's been our approach.
And the other component to that is that we do have this earned honor system. And so students have a lot of opportunity for challenge by choice. We don't have kids just sitting and doing nothing. It's not an option.
If, trying to stay out of this discussion, because this is where I start to get really excited, but when we talk about differentiation, we don't talk about just in differentiation in terms of a student's readiness. There's also the product and the way that the curriculum is delivered. And so if the proficiency that they're looking at, in this case you're talking about the summarization, that's the goal, and that's really what's being assessed by the rubric up here. It's not a writing proficiency. Now, you may be addressing multiple proficiencies with a single assignment. That's certainly possible. But assuming this the summarizing proficiency that you're looking at, all right, that's the gold standard for whatever the task is that's being done. But the way that a student demonstrates proficiency and the way that that's taught to an individual student is going to differ based on a student's readiness and a student's interest and all sorts of other things that can play in. And Commissioner-elect Judson pointed to this, asked about the rubric. In this rubric, if I'm a student who meets proficiency on day 1, I'm not done, because I also have this column that's one over to the left that could be the next time through. How can I actually take my work and build on it and improve that for, to go for the exceeding or challenge by choice or the earned honors and all of that.
We have so many students who are not satisfied to be at meets. They want to exceed.
Well, thank you. Commissioner Chino.
I had a follow-up question earlier, but I didn't get a chance to ask it. You mentioned that you were saying that it's hard to do with a large class size. My follow-up question was, what would be the ideal class size? Without taking into account the limited resources, what would be the ideal?
When I have worked with students who have really low literacy skills, 15 has been ideal. When we're doing this work, I think most of the research points to somewhere between 16 and 20.
Thank you so much for your time and willingness to answer so many questions, and it's because of our interest.
As we walk out, we just want to extend an invitation. You're all invited to our classroom. And we also want to invite all of the commissioners-elect. You're welcome to come to our classroom. Our emails are on the website. I'm Nadia Beck-Conger. This is Jocelyn Fletcher-Scheich. We encourage you to come into the schools and see the work that we're doing. We have an open door policy. And we encourage you and we invite you as partners in this work with us to come and join us. So please don't hesitate. Ask and we'll tell you when is a good time for you to come. Thanks for having us.
Right, turning it over to Superintendent Smith, starting with the school calendar.
Yes. Just a follow-up note of thanks. I took them up on their invitation to visit their class, and I can attest to that. You see in evidence the kind of things that they were talking about. We also had an opportunity to have some conversations in the context of the Partnership for Change project with other teachers who are doing this kind of work as well. And the variable that keeps coming across to me, that is so crucial to the work, on top of just the energy and enthusiasm behind it, is the time. This is, as you might imagine, it's a very time-intensive process, and the idea of holding all students to high standards is not something you just do in a conventional way. And so I think these are some good examples of what's really very promising as far as a way to think about teaching and learning that reaches all students. So thank you. Just before the school calendar, I just wanted to make quick reference to a few things. The school district and students and staff and so forth have been in the news in recent months, and for good reasons. Sometimes, you don't want to hear that you're in the news, particularly if you're in my particular profession, but I pick up Vermont Life, and there's a Sustainability Academy written up in Vermont Life. There's an engineering is elementary publication that gets circulated to 30,000 people nationwide, where one of our teachers, Janet Bellavance, was written up, talking about projects that she's doing with digital engineering journals. There are students who are composing music. We had a third grader who, was the only third grader in the state of Vermont, selected to participate in something where his composition was chosen to perform. We have other students who are involved in not just performing but composing music. Graduates who are publishing books. Students involved in all kinds of areas in the arts and science and technology. We have a student at the high school, Madison Feeney, who's the USA Today Gatorade Vermont Girls Soccer Player of the Year for this school year. So throw in a little of that dimension as well. So I think it's just important. A lot of times we get burdened with all the day-to-day stuff and all the problems we're trying to resolve or address. But every day we've got students and faculty accomplishing impressive things that are not going unnoticed elsewhere. And so I just wanted to kind of make brief reference to that.
And if I might, Commissioner Madsen's taking an EMS Math Counts team to the state championship in 2 weeks.
There you go.
Another example.
School calendar, it's just there if there are any comments. The reminder that the calendar is, the foundation of it is based on what is referred to as the common calendar that's adopted for the region, and then we work from there in ways that are specific to our district, but it's a template that is already pretty well defined before we get it. This coming year's calendar begins with the 4 days of professional development for teachers and starts for students on August 25th, and it ends with some professional development, and the last day for students is June 9th. And it follows pretty much what is typical, what has been typical, I think, in the last few years. There was a little tweaking around in October and March around some professional development and parent conference days, but the overall format, I think, is not dissimilar to what you've seen before. I don't know if there are any comments or questions.
If I may just make one note on this, that there are some questions that people raised to me about this 23rd of September. Yom Kippur has fallen on a weekend for the last several years, and it's not, and that's this year. It's a weekday. The Eid holiday we've also been recognizing, but right now it's moving backward on a different calendar. It's in the middle of the summer, which is why it's not represented on this calendar.
Any other comments or thoughts? Okay. I've been asked to just say a few words about the evaluation process. I thought I'd comment about it just in general, and also it's related specifically to administration. The district doesn't have an overall system or process that's established district-wide, and there is, or anything that's established, in other words, as a function of board policy. There isn't a board policy regarding employee evaluations. They're not addressed in our personnel policies. So it is done more or less unit by unit, employee group by employee group. And for the most part, where there are union groups involved, there's some specificity around the evaluations and evaluation format. AFSCME unit, for example, relates to that, and there are performance areas that are identified as the basis of evaluation. The teachers' evaluation system is actually very well established and recognized as a number of dimensions in terms of performance that factor into a total evaluation. The whole process is prescribed in terms of how it works, the frequency, what happens if teachers need to work in an area, address a particular need or demonstrate improvement. So that's the evaluation area that is the most specifically spelled out. There, the overall model in terms of at the administrative level is the superintendent evaluates principals and senior directors. Senior directors evaluate directors, and directors are responsible for evaluating the staff that they supervise. The model there, I would describe as generally performance-based around goals, performance goals that are established at the beginning of the year with the individual, and then their performance is reviewed relative to those goals at the end of the year, and based on that, goals are set for the coming year, and the cycle goes on. There has not been the consistency that you would hope to see district-wide around the evaluation process, and that's something that I think I'd flag as an area that needs to be addressed in the future to improve not just the approach, but the consistency with which it's used. Yes?
Do you think it'd be fair to ask that to be in place for next year?
I think it would not be realistic. It requires, let's put it this way, there are certain things you can just say needs to happen. For example, you will have an annual evaluation every year without exception. But in terms of saying we're going to adopt a particular model or change the approach, that really needs to be worked through. I think it needs to be established as a goal that people invest in and spend the time on, so that everybody involved owns the model that comes out of that. And you look at, there's some good stuff out there. I think if we rushed it, we probably would miss some opportunities to really have a more meaningful approach to evaluation. It's March. I think, frankly, my hope for this year is that that using the approach we have, that we just ensure that everybody who is scheduled for an evaluation receives an evaluation, that it's a meaningful exchange between an employee and their supervisor, and that it does address issues that are of focus for this year and identifies some areas of focus for the coming year, which would be constructive. But I think in terms of looking at a model or a change in a model, that really, I would certainly encourage the district to establish that as a goal for next year, but allow the time to do it really thoroughly.
Can I just ask you, I got the two grandpas here, Ben and Alan, and I'm sure this must have been discussed in the past.
Not at the district level.
Not on the district level?
No. With discussion of, with superintendent down through the direct reports, but not on a district-wide level. And I think something that was touched upon was a lot of the evaluation process is actually effectively contained in contract as well.
I mean, it just makes us very immature in our processes for evaluating and constant improvement and continuous improvement and the goal setting and building through. How do you build through the rules on education? How do you build through the rules on what classes you want teachers to take if you're not telling them what the expectations are and why they're doing it? So it just makes us immature.
Yeah. Again, I think from the teacher evaluation model is pretty well developed. And it's the other areas of employment that I would describe as informal and loosely knit. And I think there are clearly good models out there that could be explored. The other thing we just always have to be conscious of is, just as we were talking about in terms of this approach to teaching, the more sophisticated you try to be, the more time it inevitably involves. And some of the things that have gotten in the way of good practice have just simply been time pressures. If you've got, for example, you think about at the high school, you've got one principal and I guess one assistant principal who is not even full-time, the one who assists with evaluations, and that's it for the entire faculty. You could do nothing, but if you really had a good, we're going to really invest your time in evaluation supervision, that would take all your time. You wouldn't be doing anything else. So And we've got, principals of elementary schools with no assistants. So the supervision of teachers is very time intensive. Again, I think we have a good model there. At the other levels, there are fewer numbers of people that you're supervising, and although we're pressed for time at all levels, I think it's certainly appropriate to expect a more well-developed model that is more current and sophisticated than what we're using now, and that reflects some good, good models that are out there. I mean, you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel on this.
That's good, just to follow up. So I appreciate your recommendation that this be something that the district needs to look at. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose that going forward with the new superintendent. So I guess I would, any kind of
making him a list.
Making him a list. But also, I just wonder if that is something that one of the committees, maybe the governance committee, might also take into account when they start planning ideas.
So if I could jump in here, partially a little public service announcement that the reorganization meeting or the organization meeting for the next board will be on the 7th of April. Complications both, it falls on the 7th of April. And at that point, that's when a new chair and a clerk elections will be, and then in short succession, within a week, the chairs of the individual committees, assuming that we maintain the current committee structure that we have, whoever ends up in that governance, that role, it won't be Ben, but whoever ends up in that role, I would really strongly suggest take that as the priority, and not just I would say developing a thoughtful, thorough evaluation system, both for the superintendent but also working with the superintendent to articulate what that model would be for central office and for all administrators.
Anything else? Okay, I had send you some information about doing some sort of reorganizing and portrayed it in terms of an organizational chart. And as I indicated, the goal here, particularly in the context of someone who's serving in an interim role, is to try to address some of the implications of the consolidation and the work that we've had to do as a function of the budget process and other work involved related to that, and also to try to capture the way things actually seem to work as opposed to the way they were, just reflected on paper as a product of a more historical notion of organization. So what I've discovered is that there really are five key senior level roles to play in a district of this size, given all of the areas of responsibility, so that in addition to right now at the senior director level, where we have curriculum instruction, human resources, and equity affairs, and infrastructure and technology recognized, the finance director role really operates on that same level at the senior level, and also the current the special ed director role is really a much bigger umbrella and area of responsibility under the larger heading of student services, and in that regard also operates at a senior level. These are the folks that sit around the table when we need to have what you might refer to as a cabinet meeting, and the areas of responsibility that fall under each of those categories are not insignificant. We've tried to line them up in ways that acknowledge the way it sort of the gravitational pull around some of these things. So it wasn't a forced fit, it was the way things seemed to most naturally flow in service of the various objectives we have, whether they're more specifically student service focused, which would be that new category of Senior Director of Student Services, to also flesh out a little bit more on the education side of it. Education, both referring to what we do with students, but also professional development for staff, and making sure that we try to create opportunities to coordinate efforts of professional development, under an umbrella that allows sort of one hand to know what the other hand is doing in coming up with professional development plans that are complementary to each other. And there are not many significant changes reflected in the area of HR and equity affairs or infrastructure and technology. Again, the finance area pretty much defines itself as an area. So the action that's required and that's reflected in your consent agenda has to do with creating a position, the Senior Director of Support Services position, which is essentially the level at which the current Special Ed Director is operating, and appointing that individual to the position. And then we would be converting another position that we had to a Special Ed Director position to allow the proper support in that area. So it's we're not adding a body, but we're reorganizing the work and creating an opportunity to provide more leadership in an important area of student services.
Any questions? Yeah, Commissioner Mattson.
David actually, it's actually David's question. He asked me, but I did notice in the consent agenda when you do, or David did actually, with the position creation and the rec to hire Dylan.
Yes.
It does have salary down as TBD. Is that something that the board at some point will be approving a salary for that position, or what was the thinking?
Thinking was that was a separate issue. There was some urgency to getting the structure in place for now. The salary was secondary. I didn't want to single out this salary compared to any other salaries. The idea being that it's addressed in the same way as any other director or senior director salaries would be at that time, whenever that comes up.
Okay.
So I didn't want to single out, treat it separately.
Right, but okay, so it's not an open-ended, you could go pay this guy whatever.
No.
Yeah, I got you.
Answered my question.
Okay.
Did you have something further, Commissioner?
No, that was actually my question. I just didn't understand why we would do TBD, and I understand, so.
In other words, the salary, in other words, the salary at this point is, there's no increase in salary until such time as there's an agreement that there needs to be an increase.
What contract would they fall under?
It would be, it's an individual contract. It seems that the senior director contract.
It's not collective bargaining.
Commissioner Stoll.
So I'm asking this question as sort of educational for us. And I guess, sometimes when we are looking for a new senior director, we would have a full search, and we would, look out. And I guess I'm just wondering what the legal ramifications, if there are any, of a decision to simply move someone up. And if you could just discuss that, because I want to make sure we're on sound ground when we do that.
Particularly at the senior director level, that's our discretion. What I'm suggesting here is, if it was anything more significant in terms of the work and the individual involved, then I would say, you establish a position, you go out and look for something. In this case, all this does is capture the work that's already happening. And in fairness to the individual, when you've got that level of responsibility, but it's not reflected organizationally and they can't operate with that authority, they can't really do their job. Frankly, it's an accountability tool also. I can't really hold somebody accountable for these things when they're not recognized by our organization as having those responsibilities, even though every day we turn to that person to exercise those responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So that's why it seemed to make most sense to just acknowledge the reality and also put ourselves in a position to evaluate accordingly.
So I just want to make sure that, we have a stated commitment to diversity in our hiring, and that, this is an opportunity that we're choosing not to do, and I just wanted to make sure that that is an acceptable approach.
Concurrently, what that will open up is the special ed director position, which will be a standard search.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other comments?
Anything further? All right, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda. Commissioner Segrino, seconded by Commissioner Garrison. All in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on to committee reports. Commissioner Dodson, Curriculum Committee.
Really a brief report. We've really been enjoying a new pattern that we've set in place this year by beginning to focus on the proficiency by third grade, and then as a means to understanding what's happening on the ground. Stephanie Phillips, curriculum director, has been doing a nice job of putting together teacher presentations for us. We've had thus far teachers from the Champlain School present to us and teachers from IAA, and they walk us through the actual assessments they're doing, what instruction looks like, and just giving us a more granular understanding. So we're going to continue with that work. A big thing that we're using is Fontes and Pinnell as an evaluation tool, an assessment tool. And what we did in the beginning of the year was we looked at the spring data, and then we looked at the fall data, particularly looking for that summer learning loss issue, and we learned some things there. And now we have the opportunity there. I believe they just went through another round of Fontes and Pinnell, and you should hopefully see some growth over the course of a year. So our next meeting will be able to look at that. So at our last meeting, because we were kind of in between our ability to continue our look at Fontes and Pinnell, and we didn't have time to put together a teacher group, curriculum director Phillips just gave us a PowerPoint presentation on some initiatives that are happening at the state and regional level that impact the work of the curriculum committee. So it's a pretty extensive PowerPoint, but that'll be available on board docs.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Segrino.
At the Diversity and Equity Committee meeting, we had an update on the Equity and Inclusion Report. It's going to come out, at least a presentation to the board in May. I don't know if any new board members-elect are here, but I wanted to just say something about that for all of us. We really, as yet, don't have a set of indicators that help us see how the district is moving forward. This is really the only set of indicators, and it evaluates disparities by gender, race, language ability, folks on IEPs, and socioeconomic status. And so it's, I think, a significant report for us. It'll be the third one that comes out. It's an opportunity for us to really evaluate how we're doing with our significant goals around diversity. So I encourage you all to look for that at the May meeting. The other thing that we talked about at our meeting has been the main focus this year, which is we decided to focus on a single area in terms of diversity and equity, and that was discipline disparities. And I'm really pleased with the work that we've done. We had an opportunity to look at discipline data that the district put together for us. And I would say that what I found most gratifying about it was the concerted focus on looking at the data and some efforts to improve the quality of the data and so forth. A couple of things have come out of this this focus and the efforts this year. One is that the superintendent has is leading an effort with regard to redefining the codes of conduct for K through 12, and I would say updating the behavioral management system in the district. And I'm going to ask him in a few moments if he would describe that process to us. The other is that the district has indicated its commitment to ending out-of-school suspensions, except in the most egregious cases, and so is looking at alternatives to that and professional development that would help the schools move in that direction. So I would like to just ask if Superintendent Smith would tell us a little bit about the work that's going on here.
A quick note on that last point as far as the whole issue with out-of-school suspensions. We're looking at suspensions in general. For example, there are some issues that that need to be cleaned up around acknowledging practices that have the effect of being suspension, even if we don't call them a suspension. At what point does, if a student who gets sent home early in a given day, is that just being sent home early, or is that a suspension? So what we found is getting, you mentioned earlier about data accuracy. If you've got different schools kind of interpreting that differently, the numbers that come out obviously reflect some inconsistencies. So there's work that's being done, and within another week or so, we have a meeting with all of the all buildings involved in just dealing with it. It sounds somewhat mundane, but it's not. If you're going to have data that you can, need to be able to rely upon for decision making, it has to be obviously accurate data, and you have to have confidence in the consistency with which it's collected and recorded. And so that's just something that we're working on as a technical issue. Underlying all of this is this again, this theme, though, of what do we, can we do to reduce the frequency in the first place, but also, if you do need, under the approved criteria, to initiate a suspension, what are appropriate procedures as well? There are, again, a number of inconsistencies, so we're trying to improve the practice there so that everyone's accountable for really looking very specifically at the circumstances surrounding a suspension and understanding what contributed to it and customizing the response in ways. As we know, suspension is not a strategy. It's a consequence. It's punitive, but it's not a strategy. And so the idea is to actually bring strategies into this to address the factors that may have contributed to the behavior that generated the suspension in the first place. So that's going on. That part of it, that will be incorporated into this larger initiative around the overall sort of standards of conduct for students. But we didn't want to wait for the rest of that work to be completed to get on the suspension issue. So we kind of jump-started that piece of it. The larger issue has to do with really updating our overall standards of conduct in ways that allow us to incorporate different initiatives that we're engaged in but have been still sort of treated a little bit as satellite initiatives like PBIS or restorative justice. And we've actually found a model in a large school district where it deals with similar population, similar types of diversity as ours, and has also already incorporated the principles of PBIS and restorative justice into their set of standards. And the whole tone of the document is proactive and more positive, not just punitive, but it also very clearly spells out standards and consequences in ways that are easy to understand and to follow. So we think that'll be a good model for our work. We're meeting actually this Friday as a steering committee. We've got representatives from the different grade levels working on this. Once we get to the point where we feel we have a draft that maybe it would be worth sort of putting out there for reflection and input, we will just stop and invite a variety of stakeholder groups to weigh in on it, both internally as far as teachers at different grade levels, any other administrators who weren't involved in it, parents, some of our older students, and also groups in the community that work with some of our students who would have some perspectives, so that the whole document will benefit from that input before it's finalized. Where we expect to be at the end of the year is what I would refer to as a working draft. It's not something that we should consider final, but it would be a good sort of a document to take kind of on a test drive going into next year to see how it works for the district and give ourselves permission, give people permission to understand that it is a work in progress and therefore subject to fine-tuning as our experience suggests. So I'm pleased with, there's been a lot of willingness of folks to acknowledge that this is something that's important that we need to do. And I think there's also a lot of interest in having something that actually reflects a unified and consistent set of standards, particularly coming up through the elementary schools, so you don't have different elementary schools kind of, taking different approaches. And then certainly making sure that at the middle school level that things become more consistent. They're all feeding into the high school. And so obviously if you're, from the high school perspective, you want kids coming in who have the benefit of a set of standards that are consistent with what you're trying to do with them once they get to high school and aren't different as a function of where they happen to come from. So it'll take some time, but I to the point of having a draft by the end of the school year.
I just want to add just one other piece of that. So this is a multi-stage process, and the next step in the process it will be to look at what kind of training teachers need. So part of then the Diversity and Equity Committee's job next year will be to hear about that and hear about what the budgetary implications of that might be. So I just want to alert folks that are going to be on the D&E committee. So this is a multi-stage process, and really by focusing on high-quality data now, it's really going to help us evaluate, how this is working. And I think this is ideally what we do as a board, which is to kind of collaborate with the district to make some changes and have some data that allows us to make some evidence-based assessments of how well these changes are working. So thanks so much.
Commissioner Truman?
I want to first thank Liz and Charlie and Superintendent Smith for really being difference makers on GPA committee, being able to do its work despite often my best efforts. We kept on task, and I think we met the board's charge to beat out a format for review of the interim superintendent and establishment of a transition and return to implementation of a formal evaluation system for the new permanent superintendent, and I very much appreciate that. Thank you. If you haven't yet seen it, earlier today I sent everyone an email with a request, and I know it is somewhat semi-last minute, that lays out, well, it's a form for your opportunity to provide feedback as members of your individual committees, performance feedback for the superintendent that, as we've discussed before, based on the areas of focus that each committee established. To review that, consider that with what you know of the committee. There's some basic, if your feeling of progress is being made, an overall broad performance rating for the superintendent, its guidance, and basically an opportunity for whatever written comments that you have. I am asking those to get returned to me in some form, and feel free to contact me if there's any issues about this or anything by Sunday, March 22nd, in advance of the March 24th GPA meeting, which will be a discussion with the committee members and interim superintendent Smith, overall providing us feedback so that we have that opportunity in advance of the new board stepping in. I won't go into great detail about it because I'll follow this up more in writing. I was trying to build up a little more of a timetable. And thank you again, Superintendent Smith, for stating much more clearly than I ever could have the layout for the transition preparation stage and the evaluation format for the new superintendent, which will be basically, it's a timetable that overlaps the seating of the new board into April and May for developing what I understand the phrase is an entry plan that Yao would submit for his basically first quarter objectives, performance based on focus areas, goals and objectives that with primary input from the superintendent and the board input would be shaped for him to then, for Yao then to come back and say, here's the entry plan. The board would meet and discuss and establish, probably through the GPA committee, the timetable for that transition reviews to carry through next year when the formal process would begin. So I'm going to send that out in writing in the next couple of days so people can have that in front of them. I also noticed that apparently I completely missed setting up the minutes for the last committee, so it's all a great big secret. But I think the efforts that we came up with very truly meet what the board was very clear about wanting in getting us back on track with the evaluation process, and I think does an excellent job of carrying us through this transition period while still getting good information from and offering important input to interim superintendent Smith. And it has been just a pleasure serving with everyone. Thank you.
So, I'm sorry that I'm maybe tired here. So you want us to just fill out these forms for our own committee, just the committee we're on, or if we have a comment on someone else's committee goals that we feel strongly about, do you want us to do that
You
as
can
well?
feel free to,
Do whatever.
I'm sure the superintendent welcomes any
Okay.
input and observations,
Okay.
yes.
And then-
But yes, they're designed based as, you as a member
you
of
can use
finance,
But I could just do two of them,
But-
and two of them speak to me.
go to town.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Great, thank you.
I have hard copies of those if anyone wants as well.
I want to just bring up one note that something you said, Commissioner Truman, reminded me that I've asked Commissioner Curry to be our main conduit right now with incoming Superintendent Obeng. As someone who's part of the leadership team currently, has a leadership role on the current board and will be continuing on to the next board, the role really is just to make sure, to help ease that transition. It would be the responsibility of the next board, of course, to decide if Commissioner Curry would continue to be the point person, but I've asked her, through the transition to assume that role. And there are really a couple different things. There may be some small technical issues that for communication with incoming Superintendent Obang. But then additionally, if there are any major board initiatives so that these discussions that we're having at maybe an individual board meeting or coming out of committee meetings can be communicated onto him so that he stays aware of the conversations that we've been having. So I appreciate her willingness to take on that responsibility, and really this is to streamline so we don't fall immediately into a process where we have 12 people trying to give information to a single individual. So if you have specific questions or communications going forward that need to go to Mr. Obang, if you would guide those directly through Commissioner Curry, but also I guess while I remain in this position to include me, just so I'm aware of those discussions going on. Moving on, ITC, Commissioner Kirk.
Well, I guess we're kind of boring. The only thing we did was we approved contractors for the for accepting the bids for the Edmonds work this year, and we're continuing on trying to find a permanent home for Horizons in the On Top program. I set that as a goal to try and get that accomplished. It is not accomplished. We still need to work on it. So whoever takes this position, I hope that they take that quite seriously. We're down to 1 year now. When I started on this, we were down to a year and a half. So I hope that whoever takes the ITC position takes it quite seriously. It's something we really need to focus on. Whether or not we want to have the alternative high school program and the special ed program in the district, or we want to farm it out, or what we want to do, it's kind of an important issue. I would hope that we would continue to serve our students well here in Burlington, keep those two programs alive and functioning. That's it.
Commissioner Stoll.
Okay, so you take a big sigh of relief. The budget's passed. I want to thank absolutely everybody in the community. We don't have many community members here, and the board for all the hard work that we all did in making this happen. So thank you, everybody. But unfortunately, the Finance Committee gets no rest, so we're continuing on. So there are a few things that we're working on now. We are working closely with the administration to ensure that the many suggestions that we received through the auditor's report and Ed Gomo's consultations are being addressed, and they are. The administration has put together a master plan list, and they are working through them. So at each of our meetings, we are getting a report on where they are on the various initiatives that we need to look at. So that's one good thing. The other thing that the board is working with the administration closely on is ensuring that we finish this year without a deficit. We will be looking at our next finance meeting, if anyone's interested, at sort of the final numbers going into the end of the year. Superintendent Smith and Director Lavery are going to be presenting those to us, so anyone that would like to see that is welcome to come to the meeting. And I would just direct you to our minutes for more details about things I've talked about, because there are some more details there. So finally, I do have one motion to bring to the floor. The young man set it up for us today by asking about the BTC budget. So I don't know if you are all familiar with the BTC. I would say it's a gem in our school district. It's the Burlington Technical Center at the high school. It is absolutely phenomenal, and I say that as someone who works in another district that sends kids to this program, and also to a parent of a student in one of the programs. So my son is in the medical and sports science program, but there are 11 different programs. They are really an amazing way of integrating technical education and more vocational education into our academic curriculum. So we house it, but as I said before to the young man, it's a program that all the different districts in our area use and send students to. So each year, as the housing district, we are required to pass a budget. This budget is managed and developed by our director of the BTC, whose last name I can't pronounce.
I think it's Aliquo.
Aliquo, right? It looks different than how it's spelled. And he came to our last finance committee and he went through and explained the budget to us. Afterwards, I went back and got just a little more information from him, so I was more familiar with it. You'll be happy to know that in his 9 years of working on it, there has only been a deficit 1 year, and that was due to an administrative error. So he manages his budget very well.
Not his error, by the way, apparently.
Yeah, it was not his error.
Aliquo.
Aliquo. So that was good to hear. So, and in a sense, while the budget sounds big, I'm going to be asking us to approve a $2.8 million budget. In fact, most of that is recouped from the revenue that we get from the sending schools, and also a rebate that we get for the use of our buildings. So anyway, so I'd like to just put the motion on the table. So the motion would just be to approve the Burlington Technical Center's fiscal 16 $2,816,214 proposed budget, representing, okay, that's the motion. And then I would like to say that that actually represents a 1.3% increase over fiscal 15. So it's lower than our own budget's increase.
Can we get a second for the, Commissioner Mattson, did you want to say anything further to it?
I think I sort of said it already, so.
Any questions for Commissioner Stoll?
I would just also speak a little bit to it. There were fairly significant debate and discussion with Mark at that meeting. I was on phone, if I remember right.
Yes.
And I sent in a couple comments because I think I had to hang up, but I seem to remember there was fairly far-reaching discussion with Mark this year on it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Kirk?
Yeah, my only question, I guess, Miriam, is do you know what the percentage of cost to Burlington High School is? Is it 40%, 30%?
We start by paying 40%, but
Okay.
then we get a rebate of that. So
Okay.
the cost goes way down after that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And actually, just to follow up on what Alan was saying, there are some issues that we're going to be looking at next year. You know, this year was a bit hectic, and so ideally we'd like to be looking at this budget not now, but in the fall. So we talked with the director, and we will be doing that next year. And then also, there are some ways that the rebate I was just referring to is calculated, and it hasn't been updated for a number of years. We've been using sort of a shortcut formula. So the board requested, the finance committee requested that before we do we do this again, that we actually go back to that basic formula to make sure that we're on target. So we will be doing that.
Thank you, Miriam.
Hearing for no further discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Anything further?
I just a comment while everybody's sitting at the table, who's been here since I got here. Just my thank you. You know, I came into a situation that had been characterized as a bit of a challenge, and you know, I came upon a group of people who had clearly been just heart and soul trying to get their arms around things and just make things better. And in the time that I've been here, I've also seen, I don't know, what was it, Scott, were you talking about the learning curve, or somebody was sort of talking about that process, the growing process, right? And it was, you know, rapid. You know, I think that people had, you know, they basically just, it was very clear to me, people stepped up and did what they feel they needed to do when they got to the point where there are some things that we felt were kind of moving forward in the right direction. There was also, I think, a very disciplined response in kind of stepping back a little bit into a role that would be a more typical board member role as the situation called for, which I think is a good sort of foundational piece for the next superintendent coming in. But it's been a great combination. As I think I mentioned when the budget vote took place, and I think every perspective in the community pretty much is represented by one or more people sitting around this table, and if that isn't democracy, I don't know what is. So just my thanks to everybody.
And I'd just like to, I'm not going to give any sort of big speech or anything here, other than to say that if, I'd like everyone just to take a real quick thought back to a year from now, or a year from now. Take a thought back to a year ago. Thank you. And I know that it has not always been an easy year, and I know that at times it's been messy, and we've all paid some sort of personal or professional price in what we've taken on this, and Commissioner Sumsky was very eloquent earlier with some of those challenges that he's had to endure unfairly. But then I want us to look at where we are today, and as a board and as an administration, I think that we owe ourselves, take a second to appreciate what's been accomplished, and just a small pat on the back that we are leaving, this board is leaving the district, I sincerely believe, in better shape than we found it. And that's a family rule that we have at our house. Leave things just a little bit better than you found them, and whether that's the kitchen sink or whether that's Burlington schools, I appreciate everyone's very, very diligent work to ensure that we've done that important work. And without anything further, I would
Motion to adjourn.
and let's go to Commissioner Truman for a second. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.